Well, good morning, my little friends, and welcome to Children's Church. I'm so excited to come and tell you some more about Esther. Last week, Kim and Greg talked about Esther chapters 1 and 2 mostly, and today I'm going to do chapters 3 and 4. But I want you to keep this in mind. Some things about God. 1, God always keeps his promises. Remember that. God always keeps his promises. And God uses us. I'm going to read you some of the story of Esther. Now, this is a rhyming Bible. So it's a condensed version. We're not even going to call it a version. It's just a little bit of the story. Once there was a king who had almost everything, but he was still unhappy, for he didn't have a queen. The wise men suggested that he issue this command: let a search be made in every corner of the land. Now, I didn't like the rhyming, so I had to add a line. Now, Esther was an orphan who lived with Mordecai. The king's men saw her as they were riding by. They took her to the palace and brought her to the king. The king was very pleased with her, so he chose her as his queen because she was the prettiest he'd ever seen. What do you think? Can you see that? Mordecai would often sit beside the palace gate. He saw a man named Haman who was riding proud and straight. When Haman looked at Mordecai, his heart was filled with hate, for Mordecai would never bow as Haman passed the gate. Haman was so angry that he went and got permission to kill God's chosen people, the Jewish population, to destroy was his mission. The rule went out across the land to people everywhere. When Mordecai heard of it, it filled him with despair. He told Queen Esther, "You must go and kneel before the king. Perhaps you can persuade him to stop the awful thing." This is where we're going to stop the story for that part. Now here's what's going on. Haman was one of the king's guys, and Haman was arrogant and proud, and he made a rule that everybody had to bow before him. But, as the story said, Mordecai wouldn't bow because Mordecai was a Jew, and he loved the Lord, and he wasn't supposed to worship anybody else or anything else, so that means he wasn't going to bow. So Mordecai wasn't going to bow. And Haman got mad and said, "Off with their heads," essentially, and made the king declare it. Now, King Xerxes wasn't overly smart sometimes. But remember, we said God keeps his promises. Here's one of the promises. "For the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers which he swore to them." We're going to talk about the not destroy you part. I want to read a little more from the Bible to fill in some blanks. Esther can save her people, but that means she has to go meet the king, which is a bit of a problem. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther: "Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you'll escape when all the other Jews are killed." Because remember, Esther is also Jewish, but the king doesn't know this. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place because God keeps his promises, so he's not going to destroy them. But you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. So Mordecai is saying, Esther, this is your time. Maybe you're supposed to help save our people and help answer God's promises, right? Then Esther sent this answer to Mordecai. "Mordecai, go and get all the Jews and Susa together. Fast for me. Don't eat, don't drink. We'll fast. I'll go to the king. I know it's against the law, but if I die, I die." And that's the end of the story. Tune in next week to find out if Esther dies or doesn't die. Nah, just kidding. But I am not going to finish the rest of the story. But we'll do that next week. So I want you to think about, did Esther want to obey God did he choose her because she was an orphan? Did she choose her because she was a pretty girl? Maybe he chose her because she made good sandwiches. If you'd watch Esther from the VeggieTales, you'll get that reference. Parents, show your kids. Maybe God was going to pick her because she was a really good singer. For all we know, maybe she was. Maybe she was a really good dancer. Who knows what her talent was? But you know why God picked her? Why she was chosen? Because she was willing to do what was needed no matter the cost. Remember that last line? If I die, I die. I don't think she said it like that. I think she really had to think about it because Mordecai went to her and said, really, you can't just pretend you aren't Jewish because you'll get killed too. So she had to think about it. And you know what? Obeying God's will isn't always easy. And sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy. And sometimes it's scary. Because you see, back in the day, if you couldn't go see the king unless he called you to see the king. And the rule said if you just showed up in his court and said, hello, honey, I'm home, here I am, he'd kill you. So Esther took a big chance going to go see the king. And you know what? We get to choose if we want to be used. So God will use us to help fulfill his promises, but we get to choose. And you know what else? He is also way more concerned with your character than our convenience. Do you think it was very convenient for Esther to go visit the king and take the chance of getting killed? It wasn't at all. But her character was to care for her people, right? And do what the right thing was. And God has placed us where we are for a reason. He put Esther there in the time because she needed to go talk to the king. I won't tell you what happens because that's for next week. But you too are where you are for a reason. And that's to do God's will and to just grow in character and to love other people and show the people who God is. So this week, just like Esther, you can say yes to helping fulfill God's promises. So know that God keeps his promises even if it looks impossible. Because the king was about to wipe out all the Jewish people. How is that promise going to be kept? He's put you where you are for a special purpose. So maybe you're in the classroom with somebody you aren't really a fan of, but God put you there to show them kindness and to care for them. That's something to think about. And be brave and trust God, and he'll take care of you. And that's a little foreshadowing of what happens next week when we get to Esther chapters 5 and 6. So remember, God keeps his promises, and he uses us if we choose to. Have a good rest of the day.